So I just finished visiting Hong Kong, where I was spending a few days to sort of scope the place out and see if it would be a right fit for me, perhaps to live in as an expat, digital nomad, global citizen, whatever you want to call me. So I just wanted to make this quick video to give you my honest impressions of this Asian megacity from the point of view of an online entrepreneur and an expat. Is this the kind of place that I could perhaps consider as a base in the future? Let's find out. So as many of you know, my main base is in Dubai. That's where I live most of the year, but I don't want to live there the entire year. I like living around the world, checking out new places. So I'm currently on a massive tour around Asia, checking out all kinds of places to find what could be my sort of second home, because I know that I like Asia, but I don't yet know which place I like here the most. So Hong Kong was the first place in my list. I stayed there for just a couple of days, so bear that in mind. This is just my first impressions. I want to spend more time in there in the future to perhaps get a better idea, but I'm usually quite quick to like catch the vibe of the place, and I did a lot of research on like the visas, costs, company formation, everything. So I'm just going to give you everything that I know right now. So Hong Kong as a city is a place that's fascinated me for a very long time. It's sort of the, I guess, second business center of Asia alongside Singapore. It's at least traditionally a very popular place for expats, mainly people who are like working jobs there, like banking, finance, things like this, but also for people who want to set up companies there. It's at least used to be a very popular place for offshore companies and things like this, which we'll also talk about in this video. But it has recently, from what I understand, become slightly less popular because of, well, the China situation, which we won't get too much into. So I wanted to see with my own eyes, what is the city like? What's the vibe of the city like? How does it fit in with sort of what I am looking for from a place to potentially live part of the year? What are the costs like? What would the process be like to actually move there if I wanted to do that? Everything like that. Before we move on, if you do want to follow my adventures around the world and you want to find out where I am, including my thoughts in real time, then I recommend you follow me on Instagram. These videos usually come out like slightly after when I'm there. I'm actually in my next location right now, which by the end of this video, I'm going to tell you what that is. So definitely follow me there. But with that said, let's get into my first impressions. One of the first things I thought about when I arrived in Hong Kong is that this place is busy. Like it is very busy. The first vibe I got when I was walking around the city center is that it's a very compact place. And I actually really like sort of compact, kind of busy cities. Now, Hong Kong is sort of on the side where it's getting to be maybe a bit too busy even. It's very compact. Like the city center is not that big. It sort of feels like the New York City of Asia. That's perhaps the best way to describe my first impressions. Not that it's the same as New York City, but it's sort of the Asian version of that kind of vibe. Like just very tall building. I think it's the highest concentration of skyscrapers in the world. Just a lot of building, a lot of people around you going to work, like being busy. It's a very sort of efficient place. It's so crowded and busy that when I was trying to go to eat, I was looking at like popular places to eat around me. All of the ones, I swear, all of the ones that were actually good, they had a massive queue going into them because it's so cramped that all the popular places are always just completely full. And I was going to this restaurant that wasn't even like that highly rated or anything, but it was so busy that I had to sit like on a table across from a random person because they just have no space. So they just have this sort of very interesting culture of just efficiency. It's not like it's the worst thing in the world, but it was just an interesting experience, I guess, and not what I'm used to. I was almost automatically comparing it to Singapore because obviously Singapore is the other sort of business center, like a first world kind of city in Asia. And compared to Singapore, Hong Kong is definitely very different. Hong Kong is much more dirty, like it sort of smells everywhere, whereas Singapore is just very clean and polished. So in that sense, I actually very much prefer Singapore. Like from a place to visit, Hong Kong is actually a lot more exciting, a lot more interesting. There's a lot more happening around you, but as a potential place to live, I would perhaps prefer more of the vibe of Singapore. I was reading a lot of things online and people are saying that it used to be actually even a lot more exciting before the whole China situation happened. Now it's becoming more and more Chinese, and it definitely does feel very Chinese. And obviously I can't comment on how it's compared to how it used to be because I haven't been there before this, but that is something to consider. What I like about it as well is that it's a city where you can just walk around and get lost. Actually, one of the things I don't like about Dubai, where I am, is that if you're going between different areas, you sort of have to drive, you have to take a taxi, you sort of have to plan where you're gonna go in advance. Whereas in a city like Hong Kong, like New York, things like this, you can just sort of pick a direction and just walk, and it's just very interesting to see what you find. There's tons of interesting things to do. It's just a very vibrant place. I went on a hike on this massive mountain mountain. It's called the Victoria Peak, where you get this insane view of Hong Kong. It's very hot and humid though. I almost literally died walking to the top of this mountain, but it's a very good workout. Should not have done that leg day yesterday. But I was not about to take a tram. Not happening. I also went to a bar called Ozone. I believe it's the highest sky bar in the world. You can take a ferry across the river where you get just insane views of the skyline. One of the most impressive skylines I have seen anywhere in the world. They have this amazing light show every day at 8 p.m, which I saw. It's very good and like clean public transport. But again, because it's so full, even at off-peak times, the tram is always just packed full of people. And I don't really enjoy being squished inside like that. So I hope that gives you sort of an idea of the sort of vibe of the place. And again, obviously, it's just my experience. Then how does this compare to sort of what am I actually looking for from a potential place to live? I have this framework that I use with this couple of criteria that I usually look for. Number one is weather. I like warm weather, like perhaps most people do. In Hong Kong, the weather is hot, but it's actually more pleasant than something like Singapore. In January, the highs are like 20 degrees or something like that. And then in midsummer, the highs get to like 30 degrees or something like that. When I was here, it's April. It was getting quite humid and hot, but not like too hot yet. It was very hot when I was walking to the top of the mountain and did definitely feel very humid, but it's not like it was uncomfortably hot. So I actually very much like the weather here, so it gets a plus there. So I also like a big, busy, sort of hustle and bustle kind of city. Again, like I said, Hong Kong is very much like that, but even like slightly too busy perhaps in that direction, if I want to say. I like modern places. Now here, Hong Kong is obviously a very modern city in the city center, but at the same time, it does also kind of feel old. Like if you go and you look at the sort of more normal apartment buildings, it's just very small and cramped. Again, sort of a similar vibe as like New York City. Like a lot of New York City is very nice looking in terms of the skyline and everything, but there's also a lot of very rundown looking buildings that just don't look that nice at all. It has a very sort of gritty feel to it. It's a kind of place that's amazing for like travel videos or something like that, because there's so many like interesting looking things around. If you're looking for that kind of vibe, then it's great, but perhaps not exactly my kind of vibe or a place to live, that is. Another thing that I would look for is networking. So does it have other people around, specifically for me, entrepreneurs that I would like to network with? And I'm sure it does, but it's also not the kind of place where I see too many people going to nowadays. Maybe it was in the past. Again, with everything happening, like I don't know any single YouTuber or non-entrepreneur similar to what I do that has chosen Hong Kong as the place to be. Now it probably has that community, but definitely not at the same level as a Dubai or a Singapore or something like that in terms of networking. It's a very career and business oriented city in general, but it's more catered towards, I feel like, big corporations, people working like banking jobs and things like this. And that's not like exactly the kind of world I am in it right now. But if that is something you're interested in, it could be a great choice. I also look for safety. It is a very safe city compared to Western cities, but then again, any place in the world is safe compared to New York City or London. But at the same time, it's obviously not at the same level of like a Singapore or Dubai or things like that. These big cities that I mainly compare it to. I also look at where is the place going. What I really like about Dubai, for example, is that while it's obviously no place is perfect, it's moving in the right direction. This is what I always talk about in my Dubai videos. It's growing. It is going towards more freedom, more business friendliness. It's growing in a positive direction. Hong Kong is great, but it sort of feels like it's going down, like it's sort of going in a negative direction towards less freedom and things like this. And that's just not something that I like too much. So definitely something to keep in mind as well. Now, in terms of cost and taxes, it is very low tax. So we like that. No zero tax, but I'm not really about like, oh, I have to pay zero tax. It's pretty reasonable tax. I think is like less than 20% on the personal income side. It's 8% up to $300,000 in income in the corporate side, and then 16.5% above that. But there's a few nuances to that, which we'll talk about in a second. But it is a very expensive city to live in terms of cost of living. I think it has like the most expensive real estate in the world or something, or at least close to that. And that is why I'm mainly comparing it to not a place like Thailand or Bali, but I'm comparing it to a place like Singapore, like Dubai, because it does have first world, like very expensive prices. Cost in terms of like food and stuff, it's not like crazy expensive or anything like that. It's probably like similar prices to Dubai, which is quite reasonable. It's just the real estate, both in terms of rent and especially in terms of buying, is very expensive. But now let's talk about, okay, if I was to move here, what are the options that you have? Now, from what I understand, and I didn't do all the research on this, I would do that if I was actually considering it seriously. There's a few options. They have this business investment visa, where essentially if you go there and you form a company, you can potentially potentially get residency via that, but it's a bit of a bureaucratic process from what I understand. They look at a few factors in terms of like what you're doing, your track record and things like these on whether they will allow it. I have no idea what the actual likelihood is, how likely it is to be approved and things like this. Again, I don't really know anyone who's done this process, so I can't speak on that, but it's certainly possible. And then they also have this capital investment scheme where you would have to invest 30 million Hong Kong dollars, which is what, 4 or 5 million US dollars in the country. If you do that, you get residency. Now, if you're at that level, then that is obviously a great option for you. I'm certainly not at least yet. But where Hong Kong is more interested is on the company formation side. Like traditionally, it has been a very popular place to form companies, specifically offshore companies. So what is an offshore company? An offshore company is a company that you form in some location, but where you don't live in that location. So why is Hong Kong popular for this? Well, many reasons, but mainly because Hong Kong has what is called a territorial tax system, meaning that any income that you earn outside of Hong Kong with a Hong Kong company is not going to be taxable in Hong Kong. For example, if you own real estate outside of Hong Kong, any income from that is not going to be taxable in a Hong Kong company or you as a Hong Kong resident. But the other place where this is useful is that let's say you have a company registered in Hong Kong, but you don't operate it from Hong Kong. Let's say you operate it from Thailand. That company is not going to be taxable in Hong Kong because you don't have any Hong Kong income, meaning that if you're able to have no tax in the place where you live, which is actually not as easy as it sounds, you could potentially have a 0% tax company. But this is not tax advice. This is just based on my preliminary research. Do your research if that's actually something you're interested in. But it has been traditionally quite popular for that reason. Also because Hong Kong is sort of just a very trusted jurisdiction. Like it's actually quite underrated how important it is that your company is registered in a place where people are not going to be weirded out by sending money to a company in that place. If you have a company registered in the Virgin Islands, for example, people are going to be like, oh, so do I really want to do business with a company like that? Whereas Hong Kong, because it's very reputable, which is also a very underrated benefit of forming your company in Dubai, which is where my company is, it's much easier to do business for that reason. The infrastructure in terms of business and everything is much better, both in UAE and Hong Kong. It's a very business-friendly place in general, but there are also a lot of downsides. I hear that banking can be very difficult, especially now with the China situation. Like, do you really want to have your company there? That's probably what a lot of people are thinking. So at least for me, it's not what I would do right now. I would much rather keep having my company in the UAE, and this is what almost all of the more serious entrepreneurs that I know are doing. They have a base in Dubai, they have their company there, and then they have the freedom to travel around the world, spend their time wherever they want. Of course, not right for everyone, but it works for a lot of people. By the way, if this is the structure that you're interested in forming and you want to hear all the details about that, I can hook you up with my partners down below, where you can book a free consultation with, and they can help you with the entire process and see if it's right for you, etc. So as a conclusion, what are my concluding impressions of Hong Kong? It's a very interesting city. It's very good in a lot of areas in terms of business, the city, weather, tax, everything. It's good. The issue is that it just doesn't quite stand out in any particular way in any of these dimensions. For business, if I wanted to have a business somewhere else other than Dubai, I would probably rather have it in Singapore than Hong Kong for various reasons. If I wanted to live in a sort of tier 1 expensive Asian city, again, I would rather live in Singapore than Hong Kong. It's not that Hong Kong is bad, it's just that Singapore has more of the things that I actually like. If I wanted to live in a budget destination, then obviously I wouldn't be in Hong Kong, I would be in Thailand, I would be in Bali, I would be in Vietnam, which is actually the place where I am right now. I'm checking out Vietnam for a couple of weeks before then heading to my next destination again. So stay tuned for the channel because I'm going to be making videos about all of these places that I'm going to. So Hong Kong is a great option if you're looking for like a nightlife city. You just want to live in a very busy, exciting city. But even then, you could also just go to Bangkok where you get that nightlife, the sort of exciting city vibe, except for a much lower cost. But who knows? These are just my opinions. I always recommend go check out the place yourself. Maybe it's right for you. Something that is a place where I definitely want to visit a lot. It's a very interesting place to visit. Perhaps not to live right now, but I want to keep visiting it. Certainly a very interesting place to travel to. So those are my impressions. Like I said before, if you want to follow my adventures in real time, do follow me on Instagram. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. And if you want to find out what my impressions were of the other Asian megacity of Singapore, you can actually watch this video right here, where I give a similar review of Singapore. And then in the future, I'm going to be making videos about Hong Kong versus Singapore, Hong Kong versus Dubai. Let me know what comparisons you want to see, by the way. And for all of that, subscribe to the channel. With that, I will see you in the next one.